Hi everyone, I'm Dominique Shakarami and I'm the Senior Technical Writer here at GreenGrowth CPAs. And today we have an amazing presentation for you guys.
Yes, awesome stuff. Licensing. Every one of you guys is going to need some licensing help, some tips and tricks. And Dom's got a lot of experience with licensing, and we've kind of got what's going to make an application successful, what's going to make the process, it's a tough, long process, right?
Yeah, it's drawn out. Competition's pretty stiff.
Yeah.
So knowing what goes into the application is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So you do get your permit and your state licenses.
Exactly. So, hey, anybody just joining now, let us know where you're calling in from. Where's the spot at, where you're at. We're calling in from Los Angeles, California, right up by the Grove here, the farmers market. So if you're ever in the area, come stop by our office. It's 145 South Fairfax in LA. We'd love to have you kind of show you around the spot and then explain, what Dom's going to go into today, but even more nuance for your particular area, your division, all those kind of things. So yeah, don't be shy. Drop some comments in there, right? Tell us where you're calling in from. And let us know if you have a business already. Are you looking for your second license? Dom's got some facts around, how concentrated these things are. It's not everybody gets one kind of thing, as you'll see later down the presentation, right?
Yes.
It's a commodity. People are trying to buy up a lot of these type of things, right? It's not just a one-time thing.
A lot of the applicants have done this before. So if you're thinking about getting into the business, it's probably best to know exactly who you're up against and what you have to do to get a permit.
Exactly. All right, so let us know where you're calling in from. If you got a business already, and if any cities you're looking at. We've also, we spent time in Pasadena last night. Pasadena is opening up their application end of this year or beginning of next year.
January 1st to the 31st is when they're going to accept submissions. There were a lot of people there, honestly, but competition seems pretty stiff. The application is dense, so, it's always best to be prepared.
Yeah, and we're going to help you do that today. So, yeah, Pasadena, California, all the different things. So if we get our weekly emails and you guys can see what's going on with the weekly emails as well, the new updates every Monday with what cities are coming online, changes to regulations, all those great type of things.
Hey everyone, great to have you all here. My name is Dominique Shakarami. I'm head of licensing for GreenGrowth CPAs, and today we're going to talk about how to put a cannabis business application together. Before we get started with this webinar, I just wanted to let you guys know that the information contained in this webinar presentation is meant for guidance purposes only and not as professional, legal, or tax advice. Further, it does not give personalized legal, tax, investment, or any business advice in general. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get started. The agenda for today is basically we're going to start off with what makes an application successful, and then we're going to break it down into sections with financials, location, architects, security, standard operating procedures, staffing, community benefits, labor, and a lot of other things that we're going to tie up neatly in the end. Just a few things to give you an idea of what we do here at GreenGrowth CPAs. We do tax preparation. We've completed over 500 annual tax returns for cannabis operators spread across all verticals. So that's dispensary, distribution, cultivation, manufacturing, delivery, and testing. We also have over 300 clients based in various states. We have clients from California, Colorado, Michigan, Oregon, and Washington. We've also performed over a dozen audit-related projects in the last year, and we're expected to hit 7 digits in revenues in our second full business year, which is this year, 2018. We do want you to know that we have a thorough and deep understanding of tax, compliance, and assurance-related requirements for the cannabis industry, and this includes licensing. We can help you with tax preparation and planning, auditing and assurance, business plans, and anything else related to operating a business in the cannabis industry. So like I said, we're going to start with what makes an application successful. I think what all applicants, prospective and current applicants, really learn along the way is that the instructions and understanding them is about 80% of passing a successful application. You have to understand what exactly the city or the state is looking for how they want it delivered. A lot of the time, the headers or the requirements can be misleading. Like I said, they could say, "Oh, we need a business plan," but when you read the requirements or what they're asking for, it has nothing to do with your typical idea of what a business plan really is. So half the battle, or more than half of the battle, is really understanding what are they asking for, how do they want me to submit this, and then submitting it. You're going to want to thoroughly address every part of the application in detail. You want to make sure that you understand the requirements. Although most of the time applications do have the same requirements, they may want specifics that other applications don't. For example, let's say Linwood, the city of Linwood in California, they want a business plan that requires you to demonstrate and explain your daily operations, which includes cash handling practices, a little bit of security, some inventory and record keeping, where versus the city of LA that might say, "Oh, we want a business plan that wants you to show financials, what your company's mission and vision is," which is pretty much what you'd expect in a business plan. So just be careful and look at the descriptions of the headers, because sometimes the headers can be misleading. Next, you're going to want to have to surround yourself with the right people. You want to show in the application that you have the right team in place to run a successful operation. Usually they will ask for the owners or licensees to include a short write-up demonstrating experience in either the cannabis industry or a related field. And if you don't have this experience, you're going to want to find people that do and include them in your team. You're also going to want to have solid financial projections and security measures to prevent fraud. As you know, cannabis is a highly regulated industry, and these are the two pillars that most states, if not all of them, want you to focus on. You're also going to want to vet all of your partners. Do your due diligence. You are going to have to go through a background check, and this background check is required by all cities and states. Another really important thing that you should consider before even applying for a cannabis business license is you're going to want to make sure you have enough money to build out and operate for at least 6 months to a year. You know what? We get a lot of inquiries from potential clients who want to get into the cannabis industry, and they are always blown away by how much money actually goes into building out and operating a cannabis business before it becomes profitable. And there's no other way around financials. Cities and states will not issue permits to people that can't demonstrate a financial capacity to start a business and keep it running. And second, if a person, we do get a lot of clients that do not have experience in the cannabis industry. On the other hand, they have experience in business, successful business. And that is something that cities look at also, because not everybody will have cannabis industry. It is illegal. It was illegal on a state level and is now legal. So, if you are able to demonstrate some sort of experience in the cannabis industry, that's self-revealing. But if you don't, then you really need to consider putting a group of people together that can show strengths in business, finance, HR, that all add up to a successful business. For example, we get a lot of inquiries from people that want to become cannabis business operators that have no experience even running their own business. So they could have some money, that they've inherited, or some friends, a group of friends that, hey, decide one day that, hey, we should get into the cannabis industry. And if we pool our money together, then we can definitely start one. And sometimes they do have enough money, but the question is, who are the team members? And a lot of the time, you may have to pay to outsource for these qualified team members. If you're going to get into medical cannabis, you may want to have a doctor or a pharmacist in some way, shape, or form on your staffing plan, at least for the first 6 to 12 months. This always strengthens your chances of being issued a permit and a license, because, even if you have the money, you need to have the staff and the members to trudge forward successfully in this industry and remain compliant, because that is a really big issue, compliance. And once track and trace is fully operational and functional across the board, compliance will be one of the big determinants of whether or not cannabis business will be successful. So if I were you, the best thing to do is to go into your bank accounts or your asset portfolios and see exactly how much money you have, how much money you're going to need to raise, and how much money you're going to need to put into this cannabis business, because it's not cheap. You're also going to want to have a really solid understanding of state and local regulations. Most of the time, applicants will hire consultants to do this for them. Regulations can be tricky just because they're very vague. There's a lot of wiggle room. So you're going to want to find somebody that can either be part of your team to help you with compliance moving forward, or you're going to want to engage the services of a company or a consulting group that can do this for you, like us. The last thing that you're really going to want to think about before you apply for a cannabis business license is, what is going to set my business apart from everybody else's? And a lot of the time, this is done through, giving back to a city. It's more about community integration, flipping the idea of cannabis is bad into how cannabis can actually be helpful, how it can reach out and touch lives, across the board, whether it's for patients or consumers, and especially for the community where you're going to set up. There is a lot of competition for cannabis licenses. Consider this: 20% of cultivation licenses are held by just 12 licensees, or 0.7% of licensed cultivation businesses in California. As of June 8, 2018, 3,535 cultivation licenses has been issued to 1,607 unique license holders, meaning that the average licensee holds approximately 2 licenses apiece. Cultivator licensees are well-prepared, established operators who have mastered the art of submitting an application. So if you take that into consideration, you're really going to want to do your research, figure out if this is the industry you want to get into, because there is a lot of competition and a lot of qualified, operators that are in this for the long run. So if you want to be in the industry, think long term as opposed to short term, because it is going to be a big investment. So when you're looking at your financials, most of the time you want to get an expert or a professional to help you put together some pro formas, projections, just to see how much you're going to have to need to build out your business to operate it successfully for at least a couple months until you start making some money to offset your expenses. And we can definitely help you with that. You're going to have to prove that you can afford to start this business and keep it running. A lot of the time in applications, they ask you to identify the source of your funding, whether it's through investors, they call them people with financial interest. It can be anywhere between 5 to 20% of the company for individuals that are considered to be those holding with financial interest in the company. Sometimes they ask you to show liquid assets, and this is generally because of the nature of the industry. A lot of it's obviously a cash industry, and a lot of the assets will be liquid. But starting out, that's not necessarily the case. It could be tied up in your mortgage or whatever. And some of the cities will require you to show liquid assets. So you might want to take that into consideration and look into that requirement, that specific header that says financials, and the requirements for that part of the application. Like I said just a little while ago, that you will want to get somebody to do your pro formas and some projections. This should show your operating budgets, your build out costs, and your proof of capital. Once you get this done, and this should be your first step in deciding whether or not you actually want to advance and get a license, because this part is pretty much what cities and states look at to see is this person serious? Can this person survive in the industry? And can we expect some responsible tax compliance on their end? Our experts estimate you will need anywhere from $300 to upwards of $4 million to build out a cannabis business. It's really dependent on what kind of activity you want to get into. So there's the retail storefront, which could go up to $4 million. This is the typical dispensary that you walk into. And then there is the delivery only retail license where they just deliver, you order something and they deliver the products to you. This build out's a lot cheaper. Sometimes you only need $30,000 to build out a small facility. There's a big range, and you have to decide based on your financial capacity which of these you can actually see yourself getting into success and successfully running and building out. A typical rundown of some of the costs you can expect in the state of California is, let's start with that license and application fees. So depending on the locality, like the city, it can go from anywhere between $6,000 to $60,000. So, for example, we have Long Beach for adult use facilities. I believe the licensing fee is about $5,700, give or take a couple dollars. And then we have cities like the City of Commerce, which has a $13,600 and some application fee on top of about almost $40,000 in development and permit fees after that. So it really depends on what city you're looking at or what state, because the fees vary significantly. On a state level, there is a fee schedule that varies depending on, how much product you're going to be making for cultivation. And the same goes for manufacturing. And for distribution, it depends on how much you foresee making in the industry doing distribution. So there is a fee schedule set, and it really is dependent on how much product you're going to be cultivating, moving, processing, and all that good stuff. So like I said before, you really need to sit down and decide, like, how much money do I have? How much money can I get? And which vertical do I want to get into? There are also, again, operating expenses which vary depending on the vertical. So cultivation has a pretty high recurring set amount for operating expenses because you're going to need to buy all the supplies. You do have your HVAC machines if you're doing indoor grows. I mean, outdoor grows are a lot cheaper only because you don't have lights to worry about. But if you are doing indoor grows, you're going to be changing out light bulbs. You're going to be, buying nutrients. You're going to be paying your electricity bill. So all of this you should factor into deciding, do I really want to get into cultivation? Is this the right vertical for me? Another thing that you should consider for operating expenses is your rent. So a lot of the time when you're looking at properties in green zones, and green zones are areas within the city that have been zoned for marijuana or cannabis cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and retail, landowners will jack up the prices. This means they'll charge you per square foot, and instead of paying, let's say, 50 cents a square foot, they will charge you $2 a square foot. So this is a really big expense, and it's a recurring expense. So if you are fortunate enough to own some real estate in these zones, you could, with some creative business structuring, manage to use this rent and push it off into another business structure like a corporation, like a holding company where that you pay the rent to. So you're not really losing that much money in the process. So you should see a consultant or, your attorney to see, or us, to see, how you can creatively maneuver the best way to keep your profits within your group of companies. And then the next thing that's probably the biggest expense and is recurring is your salaries for your employees. What sets the cannabis industry apart is the fact that a lot of the time cannabis businesses will, or right now are required to offer living wages. This means that you're paying your employees part-time or full-time above minimum wage. A lot of the time, applicants will say that, one of the biggest things that sets us apart is that we want to help improve the quality of life of, the residents of the community, but also the employees that we have. You want to make sure that this is part of your application, and you want to outline how much you're going to be paying them, what their job descriptions are, what they're going to do for the company, and factor that into your financials, because like I said, this is a recurring expense that you should consider moving forward. Now, if you're in cultivation, you're going to need more employees than a dispensary, and you should consider that too, deciding on which vertical you want to get into. Going back to rent, with rent also, applications will ask you if you are the landowner or if you're leasing. If it is the case that you are leasing, you will need generally a letter of intent from the landowner stating that you will be entering into some sort of lease agreement. He or she is aware of the nature of your business and that he or she is on board with this. One other thing that you really need to consider when you sit down to do your financials is to factor in the fact that when you start building out, you're not actually operating, but it is considered operating costs. So you start building out, you start paying your lease in January, and you finish building out in June. That means you're paying your lease for 6 months on top of all the build out costs, and then you start operating. So by the time you actually start to make some profit, it's almost December and you're out a whole year with rent, utilities, salaries. So this is something you really need to think about because your expense cost is so heavy up front, and the time to make money is you're just catching up all the time. So it takes about a year, between 6 months to a year, to start to begin to make some profits. And thinking about financials this way, then you'll know exactly how much money you're going to need to have to keep the business afloat before you actually start to make money. Some other costs that are included in your financials is how much is security. Obviously, security is a really big issue in this industry just because it's highly regulated. It's still illegal federally. So states and cities will want you to have very strict protocols to prevent diversion, theft, loss, and other related illegal activities. Sometimes security agencies will charge you, they will always charge you an arm and a leg just because, like I said, this is a highly regulated industry, and you're looking at costs like $20,000 or more in a month. You have security officers, you have trip alarms, panic alarms, duress alarms that need to be monitored 24/7. You will also need security video surveillance, monitoring, and a lot of the time you're still paying costs on build out, which is ID cards, all this stuff. Record keeping also needs to be secure. So basically your security budget should be significant in the sense that it is a recurring expense, and you should definitely include it in your financial projections for operating costs and your operating budget. There is also another white elephant in the room, and it's marketing. I'm not sure if you guys know about 280E, but that's for another session. Basically, it just says that cannabis businesses cannot deduct expenses related to marketing and advertising. So you should definitely carve out a budget for your marketing, because this could be a recurring expense depending on the type of vertical you decide to get into. Regarding interior and equipment, depending again on the vertical you choose, if you decide to get into manufacturing, your one-time big-time expense is definitely going to be your equipment, and your recurring expense would be typically your electricity, because these machines need to be cool and they have to run 24/7. Another thing to think about is inventory. If you are obviously a retailer, you're going to need to purchase your inventory from distributors, manufacturers, and cultivators. So depending on what you want to sell, how big your shop is, how big your capture market is, these are all things that you need to think about. Generally, this appears as a product mix on your financial projections. So when you do talk or engage the services of an accounting firm or a cannabis business consultant, you're going to want to see a product mix included in your financial projections. Now, the $1 million question is always the location. Where are you going to set up shop? Some cities that we've seen come on board recently have actually allowed for applicants to apply with an unknown premises. This just means that they accept applications from applicants that don't have a specific location nailed down. But typically, for most cities in California and other states, you will need to have a location nailed down. You will need that letter of intent from a landlord in the event that you do not own the property. And most of the time, cities and states will have zoned marijuana or cannabis areas, specifically where these verticals can set up. Some of the markers of a prime location is, the accessibility to freeway entrances, the driveway sizes, how many parking spots you're going to have. If you're looking at the state of California, there are a ton of building codes that go into laying out your site plan and your floor plan. So you should definitely consider consulting with a civil engineer or an architect when you're deciding on a location, just because building codes can ruin whatever original plans you may have about a location. You also should expect that landlords will inflate their lease prices. So prepare for that. I mentioned that in the financial section. If you have any questions about it, we do have a team that can help you find a location, plan it out, scout an area, and connect you with real estate agents that can help you close a deal. So I told you to get an architect, and this is why. Every single application, whether it's a local application or a state application, is going to require you to submit extensive floor plans and site plans. This means that you're going to need to find someone to help you meet the regulations for the state or the locality, and it's usually an architect and a civil engineer. Most of the time, you'll be lucky enough to find an architect that can do everything for you, but there are some sections or some requirements that states or cities require, such as noise studies, geological studies, and whatnot. And this can be done by engineers. They must be licensed professionals, and ideally you're going to want to look for somebody with cannabis experience just so that they're familiar with the regulations, the cannabis regulations, as well as the building codes, plumbing codes, electrical, mechanical, and fire and safety codes of the state. Another heavy hitter on any application is the security plan requirement. So security plans generally they focus on how you are going to prevent diversion, theft, loss, and related criminal activity. So you will generally engage the services of a security professional who can do overlays for you, showing where all the security video surveillance cameras are, where the RFID cards are going to be located, where the trip alarms are going to be, where the panic and duress buttons should be, all of this good stuff, as well as protocols that should go into your standard operating procedures, which is another section of the application that you should take very, very seriously. A lot of the time, the cities will ask specifically for your security plan. Sometimes they don't even ask for other parts of the standard operating procedures, just because this is such an important topic that does address the biggest issue in the cannabis industry, which is theft, diversion, and loss of products. Nobody wants anything to go missing, and everything always needs to be accounted for. So your security plan should address these issues. Another very important section of your application is the standard operating procedures requirements. Standard operating procedures details all the policies, procedures, and processes that go into running your business. So it describes in detail how you perform tasks. Generally, you should cite local and state regulations in the process descriptions. And these operating procedures cover security, quality assurance and testing, packaging and labeling, inventory control, storage, cash handling, track and trace, You may think that standard operating procedures are cut and paste. Generally, they should include best industry practices, standard industry practices, but each business is different. Make sure you comb through the SOPs that your consultant provides you with or whatever you buy. A lot of the time they do not include the authority for that section. And generally, you should include like which regulation, which section is being quoted or used for guidance. It really helps to strengthen your knowledge and your compliance moving forward on both local and state levels. Generally, what we do is we include at the end of each section the part of like the business code or the BCC regulations. It is very helpful to include the guidance, the particular part of a regulation where you got the information that directed or guided how the SOP was written out. And sometimes it would be wise to include an employee handbook, only because they would like to see typically what your employees will be doing. What are their responsibilities, how they will be carried out, and in the event of crisis or some significant circumstances, such as like an adverse recall and stuff, you will want to have that included in your standard operating procedures, just because cities will want to know, or the state will want to know, if something goes wrong with a product that you are selling or that you have grown or processed. How are you going to rectify the situation? How do you report it? How are you going to collect the defective products? And how are you going to remedy the situation, basically? So your standard operating procedures should be able to detail every step of a task or process that will rectify, remedy, or run your business. Don't forget the people side of things. The state obviously hasn't forgotten. They usually ask for a staffing plan. This means listing down all your employee requirements, job descriptions, the hours your employees are going to be putting in, their compensation, and be sure to include a small portion, like maybe a narrative, a staffing plan narrative, that addresses the development agreement that usually comes with an application. Development agreements are not necessarily new, but they are more common now with local applications. These are agreements that the city requires cannabis business operators to enter into with the city to support the community. And sometimes this means assigning a percentage of the employees as local hires. You're going to want to make sure you leave a portion of your staffing plan to address this issue of local hiring and compensation. Another thing that's closely related to your development agreement is a community benefits plan. Now, this is asked often on the local level. It addresses how your cannabis business will give back to the community. Basically, it's a narrative version of the development agreement. So what is your company going to give to the city in return for being able to operate there? And most of the time, what we recommend is that you can donate a portion of the profits to support the annual salary of one local police officer. You would, employ people from an underserved portion of the community, create a scholarship fund maybe for some of the high school students entering into college. It could be an early education kind of promise or initiative that you could start. You could offer, if you're going to be producing, cultivating, or selling medical cannabis and medical cannabis products, you could offer to support some medical cannabis patients, or you could initiate local drives or programs for education, employment, or specific service that company can provide at little or no cost. So for example, if you're a group of, let's say, CPAs, and you're looking to open a cannabis business in a particular city, you could say, we're going to offer free tax services for people that have income lower than $45,000 a year. This is something that cities like because you're not just giving money, but you're offering a service. You're teaching people how to fish as opposed to giving them the fish. Offering something sustainable that will help individuals of their underserved communities kind of improve the quality of their lives. Recently, we've been noticing that a lot more cities are requiring development agreements, which means they're putting a lot of importance on how involved cannabis business operators want to be in the community, how integral they feel their business will be in supporting the growth and improvement of their city. Sometimes, a lot of the time when they look at these applications, they're all the same. How different can a dispensary be from another dispensary? We've noticed that these community benefit plans offer applicants to make their application stand out. This is what makes your application unique to a city that is going to be issuing a permit. What are you willing to give? How involved are you willing to be? And, how long do you want to be part of the community? A lot of the time now they have social equity programs or, small business incubation programs that they want cannabis business operators to get involved with. And a lot of the time, this is what will set your application apart. A couple loose ends that are included in applications that most people overlook is the requirement of a labor peace agreement. If your company will have more than 20 employees, you will need to enter into a labor peace agreement. There are several unions that cater to or are involved with the cannabis industry. One of them is the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. You should talk to a cannabis consulting firm or a labor attorney who can help you put a labor peace agreement together in the event that you do exceed 20 employees. Essentially, a labor peace agreement is an agreement you enter into with a union that promises you will be a good employer that offers living wages and benefits to full-time and part-time employees. There is also a portion of the application that requires a limited waiver of sovereign immunity. Basically, what this says is that cannabis business owners do not belong to or identify with any tribes that have sovereign immunity. And in the event that a tribe does say that an owner or a member is part of that tribe, they cannot use sovereign immunity to block out governing authorities such as the FBI or the DEA or the IRS. The owners will also have to go through background checks. Some states and cities will have requirements regarding convictions. They cannot be recent, they cannot be violent convictions, things like that. So if you or one of your co-owners does have a record, you may want to revisit local laws or state regulations to make sure that they can be an owner. You will want to make sure that the application gets in on time and is complete. Sometimes states and cities will have requirements regarding font size, how to submit it, if it's digital or print, or if it's both, paper size. Sometimes they'll even have formatting and tabbing requirements. So you want to make sure that you've read the instructions really, really well, because a lot of the time they will turn down applications because they are incomplete or they've been turned in the wrong format. Can you imagine submitting your application and being told that it is incomplete or it's in the wrong format and having put in so much money to put it together? It will save you a lot of heartache just to make sure that you've done everything right. Also, you're going to want to make sure you pay the application fees. I'm pretty sure no city or state will accept your application without paying the application fees in the proper medium. Sometimes they will only accept checks or money orders, cashier's checks. Sometimes they will allow for credit card payments. So you really need to read the instructions again and make sure you've checked everything off the list. Everything is accurate, complete, and right. There are people to help you do this, consultants or firms. We do this so we can offer our services to you. If you, at any point in the process of deciding on a city or a state or what kind of vertical, we do offer roadmaps and action plans that we design specifically for our clients starting out in the industry, or you could be towards the end and already have a location and want to apply for a specific city or a state. We can also provide you with a complete application that you can submit to a city or a state. So at any point or any step of the process that you find yourself and you need help, we're here to help you. When you think about getting into the cannabis industry and you get wind of a city dropping an application in a week or so, generally these submission periods are only 30 days. Generally, there are a lot of deliverables on the side of the consultant that you could be working with on your application, but a lot of the little things are supposed to come from the client. So this means you're getting together your social security number, the background check forms, all the other forms that are really time consuming, on top of your financials, being able to provide proof of capitalization. So this is definitely not for someone who's just deciding on the fly. You know, the application process is arduous and time consuming and highly detail oriented, and is something that you should be giving a lot of thought to before you actually decide to do it. If you or someone you know has any questions, or you need help with your cannabis business application, or you would like to you're at the beginning of the process and just want to see, an estimate of like, how much money do I need? What business is right for me? Which cities are coming on board within the next 3 to 6 months that I could potentially be looking to applying to, you can contact us. We're GreenGrowth CPAs. You can reach us through our website at www.greengrowthcpas.com. That's one word. Or by calling us at 1-800-674-9050. Thank you for your time today. I really enjoyed speaking with all of you. Like I said, if you guys need any help at any point in time along the way, your process of deciding whether or not the cannabis industry is right for you, we're here. Give us a call or send us an email. My name is Dominique Shakrami. I'm the licensing head, and I can't wait to work with you. Thanks and have a great day.